Save more lives. Save our trauma centers. Paid for by the 60 Plus Association.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA. Ocala.
All right, 6 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Thursday morning. You know, the Super Bowl is just around the corner, Robin, and a lot of people will be talking about the Super Bowl and about the halftime show and about, let's see, what else there's associated with that. Well, one of the things that's associated with the Super Bowl is kind of strange, is actually some people think that there might be some evidence that the Super Bowl can actually predict who the next president will be or who will win in the next election, whether it's in a general form, whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats. And while that one is probably very, very much on the superstition line, there's probably thousands or maybe at least hundreds of similar beliefs that this will predict that. We do it all the time. We say, well, there's three thunderstorms, so now it's going to be springtime, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're not true. I'm just saying that, we have these things. Well, there might actually be something that is a trend, a predictability trend, I guess you could say. Our next guest thinks so. He is Tony Fairfax. He is a demographic consultant, and he's an engineer for nonprofit and the private sector. And he's got a book. It's called The Presidential Trend, The Remarkable Voting Predictability of the Office of President, including the one that we're coming up on in about 2 years now. And Tony is on the phone to talk to us about the book and what he believes is a trend. Good morning, Tony. How you doing?
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Thank you for being on the air with us today. I probably started on the more of the superstitious type of a trend, looking at the Super Bowl or any kind of an event, right? But
Right.
this is more scientific, the one you're talking about, isn't it?
Definitely.
So
This trend occurred actually between 1972 and 2000. And the Democratic popular vote essentially increased in a straight line from 1972 to 2000. During the same period of time, the Republican vote and the independent candidates' votes fluctuated. And there was one exception. That was 1976. And so we exclude that. If you're looking at trends, you can exclude it as what they call an outlier.
Okay.
But it goes from a straight line if you look at a graph from 1972 to 2000.
And what does that straight line indicate? Just more people voting?
No. Something obviously occurred, because if you think about it, you shouldn't have a straight line. Each election, there are different candidates, different opponents, different issues with each presidential election. There are different U.S. and global economic conditions. And get this, there are different turnouts. So each election had a different voter turnout percentage, but the Democratic popular vote increased in a straight line. It shouldn't occur. And so I put forth a theory on why this occurs.
Okay, and is the theory based on the economy? Is it based on, you are a demographic expert. Is it based on demographics?
Well, you could say it's based on demographics, but essentially what occurred in 1968 and completed in 1972, the analogy that I put forth is that our electorate, our voting electorate, actually split into two electorates. And, of course, electorates can't split, but this is the analogy. We had one side that I call the Democratic electorate, and they were filled with voters that repeatedly voted for the Democratic candidate. Excuse me. On the other side, we had the non-Democratic electorate, and they were essentially everyone else. And there's some crossover. There's some swing voters going back, back and forth between the two electorates. But for the most part, we had two separate electorates. Inside this Democratic electorate, we had only Democratic voters repeatedly voting for the Democratic candidate, and new voters added. Essentially, you get a straight line, just like you would get in any population trend. And so you have people, living, and then you have essentially new people born, and you get this population trend. On the other side, there's another phenomenon that actually corroborates this fracturing theory that I've come up with.
Okay. Yeah, you said something that I wanted to just comment on, and I just said, wow, I've actually noticed something that you have pointed out. When somebody tells me that they have switched parties and they're no longer going to have a party, they're going to be independent. So they've gone down to the supervisor of elections office and they've changed how they're registered. It's usually a Republican who has said, you know what, I'm not going to be with a party anymore. I'm going to be an independent. So it was interesting that you would say Democrats and all others, as opposed to, because I'm not saying there are none, but I don't know any in my personal life. So it's a small circle, but I don't know any Democrats that became independents. I only know Republicans that became independents.
Right. Especially during that period of time, I think you had a lot of those Republicans becoming independent, but yet they're still non-Democrats. They don't vote for the Democrat candidate. But here's an important point. There's a difference between what someone says they are, what partisan persuasion they are, and how they vote. Someone may say, there's a portion of Democrats that say they're independent, but they still vote Democrat. And so you have to actually look at how they actually vote, not necessarily what they say.
When the voters come out for the local elections, when they're voting for a councilman or county commissioner or school board and stuff, even though some of those are nonpartisan, when the people come out to vote, do they come out to vote for the person, or do they still indulge and find out what party they are and vote party lines, as opposed to voting party lines in a national election?
Right. As you move down from the presidential down to lower offices, you get more swing voters, if you will. Generally speaking, you get more swing voters. Just to make a note, the trend exists at the presidential electorate level, not at the lower levels, at least as far as I can tell.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like it would be true, yeah.
And one of the reasons why is that at the presidential level, we voters, let's say, get locked into the wedge issues that don't necessarily exist at the lower levels. But as soon as you get to that presidential level, the wedge issues come into play, and so you tend to lock people on a particular track. As you move down, you have the ability to actually avoid, to a certain extent, those wedge issues. So a Republican can seem more Democratic, a Democratic can seem more Republican.
Yeah. Now, in Florida's case, where are you, by the way? Where are you calling from?
I'm in Virginia, southeastern Virginia.
Okay. In Florida's case, we have the upcoming governor's election. Charlie Crist, if you're familiar with him, was our governor, and when he was a Republican. He became a Democrat in the last year or so, and is probably, it looks like he's going to be probably the primary Democratic candidate for governor in this state, up against the current Republican governor. My thinking is that if you voted for him last time, then you should probably vote for him this time, because I don't think the guy has changed as much as he changed his party, and I guess maybe he would debate that, but people don't change that drastically, not usually. So either he was in the wrong party before, or he's in the wrong party now. He want one or the other. But the point is, as a voter, I either vote for him or his party, and that's the part that confuses me with a lot of this, because, well, I'm a registered Republican, and that doesn't mean anything about who I'm going to vote for. It doesn't really mean anything. I listen to every candidate, local or presidential or anything in between, and pretty much make a decision based on what I've heard that candidate say.
Well, here's one thing. Let me speak at the presidential level first. If you were a Democrat and became, let's say, a Republican, or were an independent and became a Republican, switched parties, once you came on board, you adopted the issues of that party. And now let's move down to your specific example. Charlie Crist now has to adopt, as much as he can, the issues of the Democrats. And so he's going to carry along the good and the bad with that, whatever that is. So in your case, at this particular moment, you say, well, I'm going to vote for, let's say for some reason you would vote for him. I don't say you are.
Well, I'll tell you. I did. I voted for him when he was a Republican.
Okay.
And this time I might vote for him again, because I like him. Yeah.
Let's just say that. what happens in our process, our voting process, is that now all of a sudden he will have to carry the baggage, someone may say, or the good things of what the Democrats stand for. And so the way you view him may change because now he has to espouse a different type of rhetoric than he did before. So this is what happens, especially it happens at the presidential level. It may not happen, it again weakens as you move down and down the levels. But for the most part, they become that party and they become what they have to say in that particular party. So individuals who might have voted for him now all of a sudden see the issues that that person is espousing now versus in the past. And so I think there will be some carryover. I think he's probably in a very good position because I think he can carry over.
Right.
If he were running for president, it may be different. But at this level, I think he will have some swing voters over because it's passed.
Tony, let me reintroduce you, and then I have a question specifically about the trend, or about the premise of the book, actually. Tony Fairfax is our guest. He is up in Virginia, we just learned. His book is called The Presidential Trend. I can't wait to hear more about it. We kind of went on a big tangent there, so I want to be fair to the book. The subtitle is The Remarkable Voting Predictability of the Office of President, including the 2016 election analysis. Tony is a demographic consultant and engineer for nonprofit and private sector groups. So the question I have for you regarding your theory is how do we, the voter, use it? How do I, as a news guy, use it? And how do the candidates use it? Do we all use it differently?
Oh, yes. The average person, I think, would use it from the point of view of this is something historic. This is some occurrence that hadn't happened before and hasn't happened since. As far as I know, maybe it has never happened in any democracy in the world. So it's something from the point of view that I think everyone should understand. I believe one day it's going to be in all the history books, because literally, think about this: our country, viewing the theory the way I do it, literally had a fractured electorate. Our electorate really broke into two pieces, and that's substantial. Now, your next one was how I know you said the parties. There was a second one.
The candidates, the candidates themselves, the news people, because we use this kind of information all the time, and then just the general voter. Yeah.
Right. So that's a general voter, or the general person, really, not just the voter. I think the average person needs to know that. Just like we learn about, what occurred in the Great Depression, what occurred in the Civil War. Yeah, everyone needs to know about this because it's part of U.S. history. The second thing is the media. Let's say the media should understand it, both from the reason that I just gave, which is, one, it's a historical point of view. It never has happened before. It's a phenomenon that exists. The second part is, the question is, we still, in the book I show, there's still this level of fracturing that exists in our electorate. The trend ended in 2000, this linear trend. But the fracturing still appears to exist. And so, why does it continue to exist, and what can occur to actually I don't say prevent it or to stop it from being fractured, and which leads to the third one, which is the parties. The trend was very, very predictable during this period of time, the linear trend for the popular vote for the Democratic candidate. So you could actually predict the popular vote. For example, in 1988. You could have predicted the 92 popular vote, the 96 and the 2000 popular vote with the 99% accuracy in 1988. You could have predicted all that. That's how straight this line is.
Okay, so let me throw in this. Let's say 2016 looks more like 1976. I guess there's two questions there. What then, I guess, is that's kind of a weird question, but just what happened. But what happened in 76? Could that same thing happen again in 2 years?
The chances are no. And the reason why I say that is because, let's first, establish what happened in 76. The reason for the anomaly was the resignation of a U.S. president, something that never happened before.
Right.
And so the trend exists. This fracturing, actually, I call it a fracturing, but what happened is there was a group of voters that left the Democratic Party, okay, that swung over to the non-Democratic electorate, as I call it, and never came back, except for that one time in '76. And they came back, in my estimation, because of Watergate, and because I think Jimmy Carter was, very favorable to, Southern Democrats and, a variety of other things surrounding that. But essentially, Watergate, I think, left a bad taste in, voters' mouths, and just sort of, shunned the Republicans for one cycle. But then they were back on to the trend in 1980, and the trend continued on up. So the reason why I say that probably not for what you were saying is because what occurred in 1968 and in 1972 was that the Democratic electorate was consisted of core Democratic voters. And so it already peeled off the individuals that were sort of loose Democrats, if you will. And what you're saying now, what you've seen now, is the growth of these core Democratic voters, from generation to generation.
Right.
So there's not a lot of, if you think of a core, it's hard. There's not a lot of people to peel off anymore. So you're not going to get a fracturing of the Democratic Party. There may be a fracturing of the non-Democratic electorate, but not the Democratic.
I just want to make sure I understand the straight line, the trend that you're referring to. I'm guessing it's national, and
Yes.
Okay, so therefore, does that trend, is it mimicked by the states? Do you see it, like if we were to go one state at a time, would we see the same thing?
Yes, not in all states. And a matter of fact, in the book, I show the analysis of the trend at the state level. I have some maps, enjoying maps. I put some maps in there. But you'll see how straight or how linear the trend is from 1972 to 2000 for each state. And I even take it one step further. Although the trend ends, and I'll go back to the previous questions of how the campaigns use it, or will use it probably. Although the trend ended, the percentage of the popular vote for the Democrat and non-Democrat electorate percentages are fairly accurate, are fairly straight and linear. And so I pick out 3 states. I pick out Florida, I look at Ohio, and I look at Virginia. And I predict what the popular vote percentage is going to be in 2016. Within a particular range.
Okay, so can I guess that if I was running for office, I would want to find the areas that are not as predictable and try to because if I already know these guys are going to vote for me just because I've got the D or the R, I need to go to the people who aren't so sure. And does the report show that? I mean, would it literally show me where I should go and campaign?
In my estimation, the trend has that potential. It'll be more than just. I think you want to use some other different data, but yes, you can do exactly what you're talking about. I show that the trend exists in down at the county level, and I pick out one particular county, it's Hampton, Virginia, where I'm from, and I look at the trend again. It's 1972 to 2000 trend. And show that this trend exists. With each drop down the level, you get a little more fluctuation because at the national level, you're collecting everybody. At the local level, there are certain issues that people do sway people, but nationally, they all get sort of aggregated together, and it tends to smooth out the trend. But it does exist at the local level. Now, let me say something that is important. It's not necessarily that you can pick any particular candidate and do this. The trend existed for this Democratic popular vote, but that didn't necessarily mean that the particular candidate didn't adjust or fluctuate the non-Democratic side. meaning a different candidate would have garnered different votes for the Republican candidate and for the independent candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important for people not to actually, misconstrue the fact that, okay, you get this straight line, it doesn't matter on which candidate.
I gotcha, right. Yeah, well, and that would make sense, yeah.
Does your book encourage free thinking? Because you've got the young people that will be voting for the first time. The majority of them sometimes, will reflect their parents' thinking because that's how they were raised. And then you've got the immigrants that have just gotten their citizenship and they're voting for the first time. And you've got people in each party saying, well, you wouldn't be here unless we did this and we did that. So how do you help those voters keep their opinions from being skewed and think for themselves?
That is very difficult. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that I say, the reason why the trend existed for almost 30 years, it's clearly new people. It's not just the same people voting, it's new people. There's something called family socialization. And this is a term used for how we actually perpetuate sort of socializing descendants, essentially. Religion is a very good example. My father was Baptist, I'm Baptist, and so forth. Not that my father was Baptist, but just as an example.
Right.
And the same thing goes with actually voting. My father was Republican, and I'm a Republican, and kids will be Republican, and so there is this great force of socialization that goes on with these voters. I don't know if there's anything can be done about it because of the fact that you spend most of the time with your family or the people who stay at your house.
Yeah. Tony Fairfax is our guest, and his book is called The Presidential Trend. And Tony, we are almost out of time, but we do have a phone call, and if you don't mind taking the call, are you okay with that?
Sure. Oh, definitely.
All right, good. Good morning. Thank you for being patient with us. You're on the air with Tony Fairfax.
Thanks, Larry and Robin. And Tony, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, brother. I shook John Kennedy's hand at age 4 in front of Abraham Lincoln's tomb, and my father is a Korea War veteran. I'm a Catholic from the Midwest living here in Florida, and I campaigned for Bobby as a child after John was shot. So I've been a Democrat in my heart with their values that long. I just would say that I think what a lot of Americans don't understand, which Tony can confirm, that the economic values of the Northeast and the Midwest oftentimes reflect the workers' value because of the strength of organized labor. And I think in the South, I wish Tony could address Reagan's speech at the Neshoba County Fairgrounds in Mississippi, where he endorses the Dixiecrat and swings them over, essentially, not with the affluence of the speech, but that he, as a Reaganite, Californian Reaganite, said, hey, it's okay to be a little bit hateful in your heart. We need your votes. And the Dixiecrats are now Republicans today who hate my Abraham Lincoln. Tony, I'll hang up and listen to you confirm or deny my observations.
I think you're spot on. I think George Bush did something similar. And it's sort of a wink and a nod to a population group that I think feels or felt, let's say, disenfranchised. And so it was a wink and nod from Reagan to say, I understand. I can't overtly say something, but I can come to a particular place that's important to you and recognize that. And because of that, I think he did a great job. One, he did a great job in 84. I think it was pretty phenomenal what he did in 84. And so, yes, those individuals that were the Dixiecrats of 1948 actually evolved and became the Wallace voters of 1968. And they broke off from this Democratic electorate, if you want to say, and shifted over from the 60s, during the 60s, and that's 68. They were the ones that actually broke off and actually never came back to the Democratic electorate except for 1976. So they stayed there. They weren't necessarily Republicans again. Some of them merged and absorbed and became Republicans, but essentially they shifted and became non-Democrats.
Tony, I love this discussion. Thank you for sharing some of your knowledge with us. The book is called The Presidential Trend. Tony Fairfax spells his name exactly as it sounds. And Tony, do you have a website, and how do we get the book?
Yes, you can go to presidentialtrend.com, and you can buy the book either at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. You can go to your local retailer. If it's not there, you can request it. And, of course, you can get it at the website following presidentialtrend.com.
Okay, thank you so much. Tony, thank you for being on the air with us. You're definitely welcome back anytime, and maybe as we get closer to the next election, you can come back on and kind of be a consultant a little bit and kind of make sense of some whatever transpires between now and then. Maybe help us out in understanding it all.
I loved it, and I would definitely enjoy coming back.
All right, great interview. We'll take a little break, and we'll be right back. We're going to speak about debate the minimum wage issue. We'll be right back with that.
Howdy, RL here to tell you about a great deal at Dairy Queen. For only $4.49, you can warm up to a hot, juicy combo of either a foot-long, quarter-pound, all-beef chili dog or a tasty, home-style cheeseburger. Smoking hot off the chart.